Yes, the inspiration behind this report was basically at the beginning of the new year to start a conversation about what we think should be really top priorities for Africa in the new year. What we're noticing basically is that governance across the continent has been improving, but even so it has fallen short of expectations, particularly expectation of the young people. And we begin to look into the factors and question why. And one thing that's obvious is that there's a huge age gap between young people and older people, older leaders. The average leader is about 62 years of age. You look at the median average young person in Africa, its population is 20 years of age. And that huge age gap, we think, may have something to do or contribute to the lack of inclusion of young people in governance and why governance has fallen short of the expectations.
It was a very interesting debate. I think it's a very good topic to start our year off. I must say I was surprised, pleasantly surprised at the optimistic tone of your report as I opened it, because here in Southern Africa we really have been reeling a bit about the after troubled elections in the DRC, maybe not so much the trouble, but the responses from our institutions like SADC and the AU and so on. I'll speak a little bit about that just now. So, and also the renewed economic meltdown and crackdown in Zimbabwe. So from where we sit, it's good to have your optimistic report, I would say. I will just very quickly look at a few general remarks and some of the issues that you touch on, governance, democracy and growth, and the Continental Free Trade Area and the African Union, which is really what I mostly work on. And then I will just look at two small gaps I think that we should address, looking at Africa's priorities. And then finally, I'll just very briefly look at what we can watch. I think we should watch Ethiopia. We should watch Côte d'Ivoire in 2019. I think there is going to be a lot of discussion about the CFA franc this year. Debt that you mentioned, China, and maybe some other unknowns. I see migration, which has been such a catchword these last 2 or 3 years, is not in your document, which is a good thing, I think. So basically just two remarks. You spoke about a reality check, Brahima. I don't want to be too critical, but I think two things generally. We always succumb to that temptation of generalization. I mean, Africa is not a country. If you look at Southern Africa and the issues we are facing here in terms of the acute debates around land, that is much more emotional, I think, than elsewhere. Former liberation movements and a lot of issues that drought, our growth is much lower than other regions of the continent. And then if you do, like saying the report, we must look at local support. Donors should support informal organizations in villages in Niger. And then at the same time say that the state should be more present in northeastern Nigeria, and the state is proud of having done that, as Mr. Osimbayo says in the report. I think that, yeah, that's my first remark. Let's not succumb to the temptation of generalizing solutions. There is no one size fits all. The other one, also maybe a little controversial, but I think it is important for us to look at terminology and how we, especially here at the universities where we have this raging debate, how we are framing issues on the continent. You know, something I noted, escaping the fragility trap, people trapped within the humanitarian crisis paradigm. When you read words like that, you get a sense that here are people in Somalia or the Central African Republic trapped in a big dark hole, and all we need to do is sort of untrap them. That kind of, let's just be aware and, you know, look at the images that are being conjured up about our continent. I think it is improving. I think the migration debate has especially been fraught with lots of terminology like flows of people and so on. So basically those are my very general remarks on an excellent report. 3 issues. The first one on governance. Moa Ibrahim, of course, is the specialist, and we appreciate all the good annual reports that we have, but from where we sit, let's not be naive. There are massive issues. As we speak, the internet is cut off in Chad, Sudan, Zimbabwe until not too long ago. In the DRC, we had a complete blanket blackout after the 30th of December when the voting took place until, I think, still some places today. That's a massive issue for us at the moment and for ordinary Africans. Failed elections, as I said, in the DRC, and some would argue in Zimbabwe, or at least an election aftermath that was troubled. And yet at the same time, people seem very relaxed about Nigeria. I mean, the vote is on the 16th of February. And if you will remember, looking back at 2015, there was about 6 months or a year that all we talked about was the Nigerian elections and how to make sure they are free and fair. And yet now, is it because, I don't know, we think the incumbent is going to roll in or something? But I would, when we speak about governance, speak about elections, there are some important gains, but our election observers, our international institutions, you know, we need to up our game there. And the last thing on governance that I just briefly want to say is the elite capture that we still have everywhere. For the youth, I think you mentioned that, Rayma, but also for people from rural areas to get access to the elite in the cities. It's that upward mobility is just not there. So it's for the youth, but also people coming from the outside. And you see that in so many countries that, you know, that elite is just being that inherited wealth that Thomas Piketty speaks about. You know, it's just there and it's captured somehow. And so that flow for young people is just incredibly difficult, and how are we going to solve that? So that's the one issue in the report that I think I just wanted to stress, because it's also something that we work at the ISS and I've been working on. The second one is the whole debate around democracy and growth, and that's where I think for 2019 we should look at Ethiopia. You know, those who argue for economic development without democracy or with little democracy have always used Rwanda and Ethiopia as an example, from Meles Zenawi and dating back to that time. And even and the figures and the studies, you know, several people have done show that you don't need democracy when there is such a very, very low level. To lift people out of poverty, you don't need democracy. Paul Kagame, you know, might be the guy we need, because he got us the CFTA, the free trade area, with these authoritarian ways of doing things. But as we see now in Ethiopia, as people's quality of life and living standards just improve a little bit more, that whole debate around growth and democracy then completely changes. I mean, I'm sure many of you go to Ethiopia a lot, like we do, to attend the AU summits and stuff, and you just see those young people, not just a few 100,000, but millions in Addis, just having access to much more, many opportunities. So what I wanted to say was, in these musical chairs that we have globally, looking for cheaper and cheaper and cheaper jobs, when you are Ethiopia and China is coming in and saying, okay, we have these employment hubs, what Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed probably needs to do is to grab that window of opportunity before people are going to be asking for higher salaries, which is bound to happen very soon, and then people or investors will say, okay, no, oh gosh, let's go somewhere else again. This absolutely cynical race to the bottom. And for now, to make sure that people get trained in specialized, and they're making shoes, send them to China to study, because that window of opportunity for Ethiopia is probably very small. So just briefly, to get the right policies in, it's going to be hugely challenging for almost 100 million people in Ethiopia, but it's definitely that to watch. I don't want to be too long. So my last point on the issues that are tackled in the report, I would say, is the continental free trade area, which really, I mean, I was the first one to say never ever. 2018 or so, well, all the, well, I think 49 countries signed up to the African Free Trade Area in March 2018. Then it was said that we need 22 countries to ratify in order for it to enter into force. And we are now at, I think, 19 or 20 countries. So there's been this amazing political will. The trade specialists will, of course, say no, it's much more complicated, and we still haven't sorted out rules of origin and dispute resolution, etc. But I think, on a positive note, it shows us the usefulness of institutions like the African Union when there is political will, and if we've only delivered that in the last couple of years, you know, that will be at least something, because people are so skeptical about the AU. Which moves me to my next point. I think when it comes to the African Free Trade Organization, you know, I think Vera Songwe says it in your report, it's not just free trade, but it's about much more. There's also free movement of people, the aviation agreement, free open skies, etc. But for big countries like South Africa, the continental free trade area is excellent, and we know African trade is going to move from 17%, which is quite high, which she mentions, I think some say it's around 15%, intra-African trade up to over 50%. So for the big manufacturers or those who have manufacturing industries, it's a positive. But as small countries are looking to free movement, and that is not yet been, I mean, we're not there at all. The Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma a couple of years ago launched the African passport. We're all very excited about it. Apparently there's going to be a new ceremony here in Addis in 2 weeks' time about the African passport. So while it's fine for big countries to have the continental free trade area, what about people's movement? And we're very far from that. So yeah, so that's my one point in terms of gaps that I think we should be a priority probably, is getting that other aspect of the continental free trade area going. Our continental institutions, there's nowhere mentioned in the report, for example, the regional economic communities. Of course, people are very cynical, and as I said, in the DRC, we really saw that those institutions let us down. Why I say this is because SADC has got certain institutional structures like the Troika, double Troika. So you have the President of Zambia, who's the chairperson of the organ on politics, defense and security, making a statement while everybody was on holiday here in South Africa, saying we need a recount and you know, new, maybe a government of national unity in Zambia. He's the chair of the organ. And then SADC says, oh no, actually, you know, that statement was not on our website, so it's not a SADC statement. So, you know, so we need to work on just strengthening our institutions.